Welcome, everybody, to our newest Dauntless episode. I am pleased and privileged to invite Mike Marquis, the CEO of Raw Sugar, and he is our first male guest and one that I adore, and we'll talk about why, because I think he is incredibly thoughtful and smart in how he helps nurture female talent, but all talent. And with that, I want to remind you all, if you're not already subscribing to Dauntless, please do. Find us on the platform of your choice, Spotify, Apple, or at dauntless.works. And welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be your first male guest. It's awesome.
Mike, can we start with just my first question for every guest is always, what does dauntless mean to you?
Yeah, you sent me the question beforehand, and I think there's a nuanced a meaning to it, and throughout that some people refer to it as courage or fearlessness, and I think you can be courageous and fearless as you go into new endeavors. But I think what's different about dauntless is, in the way I interpret it, is it's usually after been through a challenge, you've seen the challenge, and you go back in and face the challenge again. So to be dauntless, I think, is to know what you're getting into is hard and to still get into it anyway. And I
Mm.
think
Which is very true to how you operate. And I think how I operate, nothing scares me too much, perhaps foolishly, but yeah, go into tough challenges as part of being dauntless. Thank
I
you
think
for
there's I think it's Winston Churchill. I'm not sure. There's somebody who's got a quote that I love, which is like, the best advice to get through hell is to keep walking.
that.
And so like, I feel like it's a little bit tied to being dauntless of like, just, keep pushing through.
Thanks. And can you tell everyone a little bit about your career journey? I know
Mhm.
you, I was trying to figure it out more than 30 years. Um, so,
Yeah,
and we'll talk about our work together maybe at some point, but maybe start with wherever you want to start
sure.
and take us to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I'll start with you. I mean, like I think in your career you need people to take a bet on you at different times when you're unproven, and that old chicken and egg of you can't get the experience, but you need the experience, so you have the experience. And I was an accounting major and sitting in accounting, and really felt like I wanted to get into brand management, and you took a bet on me to come over on your team. And moved my way into marketing at Johnson and Johnson. And honestly, at that time, I tell folks I was really disappointed to be on the brand that I was on. I wanted to be on Johnson's Baby or Band-Aid or one of those icons, and I got put on Clean and Clear, and I was a little bit disheartened. But I think in any good career, there's stories of hard work and perseverance, but then there's also luck. And I was on Clean and Clear at a time when Johnson Johnson then bought Aveeno and then bought Rock, and it was on a journey of growing its beauty and skincare business. And I was part of that acceleration and journey, and had a lot of great mentors and coaches, and really made my name in kind of the beauty and skincare world. And then decided I needed to understand business outside of the US. And then I ran the global Listerine brand, launching the brand in places like Russia, and which is a crazy thought to think that I was going to Russia every like couple months to launch the brand. But Turkey and Indonesia, and spending time outside of the US, and managing teams and cultures that were not, kind of in the domestic states. And then came back to run a business unit that was about $1.3 billion of business, and was in that for about 3 years. And at the time, probably one of the most kind of fundamental changes in my career is we bought Vogue International, which is the OGX Moisture business, and I was I guess asked to run that business at the integration. So it was about a $3 billion integration. Took the leap, moved down to Florida with my family, with two girls in middle school, which is a tough family challenge. but really fell in love with running a smaller business end to end. When you're doing an integration, you're um, kind of running a business in reverse, but you have everything at the time reporting into you, and fell in love with that. And then as I decided that was where my superpower lie, was running smaller businesses kind of end to end, really looked for opportunities to do that. And in March of 22, joined Raw Sugar as the CEO. And it's been an amazing run for the last 3 years. And working in smaller private equity backed companies allows you to see all aspects of business and run everything soup to nuts. And it's been a blast.
Well, I have about 9 questions coming out of that career journey. I'll start with the first, which is it was one of the smartest moves that I made, bringing you over to marketing. You were a natural, and I learned from you during your first couple of years there. And building the skincare portfolio at J&J together was a blast.
Okay.
It was a challenging but good time.
It was.
Um, my question is, what made you want to move from finance to marketing?
I think at the time, I felt like I was in an advisory role versus actually being, making decisions and being accountable for the decisions. I think I gravitated, I guess, prior to that into roles where I was comfortable with being a leader, and I was often frustrated of saying, "Here's my advice, or here's what I think we should do," and have people kind of, you know, maybe take it, maybe not, kind of, and they ended up making the calls. And it was clear to me in the world of a consumer branded company that the calls were being made by the brand management team. And so that was really what kind of gravitated to me. I think you just kind of back to the Dauntless conversation. Did you know that where the fire was, and you kind of were attracted to it, and you wanted to go into the action?
Okay, great. And then I want to talk about your international experience. I mean, you're right. Today, thinking about somebody traveling back and forth to Russia to build out a business, it's kind of hard to fathom. In fact, I just talked to somebody else who shut down a multi-billion-dollar operation in the Soviet Union because we don't have that kind of relationship anymore. But maybe can you talk about what was it like and what did you learn from that experience?
I think more than anything else is I think you learn about what your biases are, and you learn to recognize them almost in like a meditative way of like, as you go into something of am I being biased? One of the interesting conversations I had is Listerine was a big brand in Indonesia. And during Ramadan, they used to build these amazing displays in the store that were built out of Listerine because there was a term called the breath of God. So like as people are fasting, they end up having bad breath, and they would use Listerine. And it was a big time to promote. But I remember walking into the retail outlets in Jakarta and seeing this mosque built out of Listerine, and I kind of was uncomfortable with it. And I was like, do we really think we should be taking this religious holiday and making a big commercial program on it? And the gentleman who was local he goes, "You mean like Christmas?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point. I got, he kind of put me in my place." And so there's a part of it where I felt uncomfortable with it, but like locally and culturally, they were not. And now it would be different in different cultures. Indonesia was a little bit more of a progressive kind of Muslim country. But you go into it asking a lot of questions. And I think that's one of the things that really changed me in that role is when you go into something with just an innate curiosity and you're asking a lot of questions, because you start realizing that your fundamental beliefs might not be lots of times we're trained to kind of come with answers as a leader. And I think that was one that trained me to come with questions.
I think that's a really important trait of successful entrepreneurs and successful leaders is being comfortable not knowing
Mhm.
and asking questions.
Yeah.
And for me, for a very long time, I was not comfortable. It's almost as if the more senior and experienced you get, the more you know you don't know, and you
Yeah.
have to ask. Do you
Yeah.
find that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, it takes a while to have that confidence to be able to ask what you think is a dumb question in front of people who report to you or think that you should be coming with all the answers. But what I think ends up being a change is when you start asking questions that you think are dumb questions and you start uncovering, you know what, maybe we didn't think about this. Maybe this is something that I was assuming we were on top of, but we're not on top of. And so, I think, you know, when I go back to what kind of leadership skills set people apart, one, I think is their ability to have really effective communication and processes around communication. And two is the ability to really ask probing questions that get to the heart of what the issue is, so that you can work to solve it.
Yeah, so that was another question I had, which is what leadership skills do you think are most important? So communications and ability to ask probing questions. And it sounds like maybe they're not really dumb questions. You get better at formulating the questions or maybe seeing the issues as you get more experienced. What else falls into that list of being a strong leader?
Well, I think there's also a time where you have to be able to pick up on signals when people aren't speaking or talking about things. I think it comes into people management. There's times where you can see a behavior on somebody, and you know it's time to pick up the call and say like, "Hey, you don't seem yourself. What's up?" You know, and not letting those go by. Um, and those happen not only with like direct reports in your team, but you know, it could be customers, it could be agency partners, it could be other folks where you see like a change, and you know, you can usually smell something is up. I think having that innate ability on a human level to connect with people, I think is really important. I think also being, I mean, it's probably overused about the ability to um, fail and be okay to failure. I actually think the biggest thing is the ability to recover quickly from failure is one of the fastest things you have to do, because when something doesn't work and everybody's looking at the leader for body language, tone of voice, how they're feeling, you have to recover quickly and have your head about you. And I think it happens all the time. Like it just you're running a business, you're going to have things that aren't going to work out, but how you recover from them, so that you know when you get bad news, you know people aren't afraid to bring in the next piece of bad news, because if they feel like you didn't recover well, or you lost your cool, or you came down on them, or there was repercussions, you know, next time that there's bad news, they're going to work to try to solve it, and that usually makes it worse.
One of the things I've loved about working with you and why I invited you to a women's leadership podcast is because not only did you pave the way for women within your organizations by training them and putting the pressure on them the same as you would anybody else,
Mhm.
but giving flexibility. But I can think of probably 3 or 4 times in my career running FlexForce where you picked up the phone and you said, I know of this very talented woman
Mhm.
has worked for me, I have to let her go. Or has
Mhm.
worked for me, the organization is transitioning, or she's relocating. Can you help her? And I
Sure.
thought that's a very unusual trait to look out for your team, past, present, and future, and to make sure that they're doing something strategic and meaty and hopefully well paying, even if it's not for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's something that women in particular need to be looking out to do for each other
Yeah.
and men, frankly, more of, especially as I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal today. You almost can't find a job without a network, without knowing somebody, no matter how talented you are.
Yeah. 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 And it's a lot of the conversations I have with, you know, people I mentor or other folks I've worked with and helped them out. It's amazing how they want to come and first talk to you about all the right brain stuff, financial levels, titles, stuff like that. And I'm usually kind of trying to take them down to a base of what's going to make you happy. Where are you going to, you know, one of the questions that was asked to me that I was asking is think about your career. Like, when were you at your best? When were you, you know, it wasn't maybe at the level you're at now, but
Right.
were you the best at a brand manager and a product director? Were you the best when you were on the special team? And how do you find the ability to do that all the time? And And so I think in many cases there's positions where, it's run its course, or it's time to, flip the chapter and go into something else. You're bored, you want to do something new. And I think it's one of the things that I enjoy the most, is helping people find that place where they're really able to thrive. And what's also more frustrating is when you're talking to somebody is in a position that's not happy, and trying to give them the courage to make a change. That's usually one of the harder things.
I think a lot about now I have my youngest is about to hit the job market. And I don't know, are your girls out of school, in school?
They're both in college, senior and
Okay.
sophomore.
So, Mike also spoke with me at a number of university related mentoring programs. And one of his pieces of advice, and one that I give all the time now, is just get into the company that you want to get into. Doesn't really matter where. Finance, sales is often a place that they're hiring. Prove your abilities and then make a move within
Sure.
the organization when you're graduating or when you're making a change. And I think that's great advice. And I've watched a lot of people do that and then pivot to get
Yeah.
into the position that was the best fit for them. Can
Yeah.
somebody do that at Raw Sugar? Are you the right size for that?
Well, we're a little smaller. Our whole
Yeah.
company's 40 people, so the ability for multiple moves is a little bit, versus a large company where you kind of get your foot in the door and you can work your way into, multiple opportunities. But we've had people pivot within Raw Sugar, where we've seen them gravitating to, an area that is, you know, more their specialty. And also the business has had a pretty strong growth trajectory. So at times we see the need, and we might have somebody there that is like can really grow into that position. So we've had some good upward mobility, and we've also had people who have learned on the job and have become experts in their field, having come in with just the right attitude and the right motivation and the willingness to learn. And those things are awesome, because there were people who came in and maybe didn't have I'm thinking of people who were in digital marketing or analytics, and they might have come in with kind of a mindset, but not really the experience. And now they're senior managers, directors of these spaces for us.
Excellent. I do want to talk a little bit about Raw Sugar. We'll super the website so
Cool.
that people can come and look at the products. I can't keep track of the categories because they keep growing. But can you talk just a bit about where was the company when you joined, and where are
Mhm.
you now in terms of categories, and anything that's coming down the pike that you can share, and then
Sure.
give the website so we'll super it right over this.
Sure. Well, the website is rawsugarliving.com, that you can go and kind of check out. And Raw Sugar was created by two founders a little over 10 years ago, in partnership with Target. So when Target started the process of creating a more elevated private label experience with exclusive brands that they brought in. Now they bring in a lot of exclusive brands, but it was one of the first brands they brought in as they were trying to establish clean personal care products. So it was kind of the pioneer of clean personal care, starting with body wash and hand soap. Over the course of those 10 years, it continued to grow. It grew. It was actually the vendor of the year at Target during the pandemic, because they did some really smart things relative to supply chain to keep hand soap in stock at Target. But the brand started creating, kind of brand love with especially the Target guests. When I came in 3 years ago, 75% of the business was at Target, and with some other smaller accounts. And we really looked to kind of make the brand more of a national brand. So reinventing the supply chain, looking at broader distribution, adding in marketing talent. It was not sold online at all. So D2C site, selling on Amazon. Um, we now are sold in Mexico and Canada, and expanding into those markets as well. And as it relates to the categories, it really has become a stronger beauty player, with our largest category being hair care now, because consumers are really looking for clean products in hair care as they look to minimize any type of damage that is coming to their products from ingredients. And so we've had a lot of success on that. And in terms of other categories, we end up, you come to a business like this, and it's great because you can kind of create a business in what your vision is. And like mine relative to categories is we really listen to what our consumers are talking about and how we react to them. So we have a kids business that is actually a pretty successful kids business because consumers are looking for ways to have clean products for the kids without dyes and added fragrances and other things like that. And we were in a conversation with some consumers, and somebody made kind of a cheeky comment of like, I have kids, but they all have four legs. And so we actually made a pet line that is only available online right now. But it's kind of I take that more of a purist approach of like versus taking an idea and crushing with market research process. We kind of are able to take an idea that is pure from a consumer kind of conversation and then move with it really quickly, bring it to market, and we're testing in the market.
That's exciting. I'll look for pet care. And I look at your clean brand, and now most young parents I know and most younger people check
Sure.
whereas we used to say nobody turned the bottle around.
Yeah.
Less than 15% of consumers today, they just hop on an app and
Yep.
see how clean it is. How challenging is it to make great skincare and great cleansing products, hair care products that are clean, that meet your clean for all goal?
I think if it was all based strictly on science, it wouldn't be as challenging. So I think we kind of understand, what we believe the right ingredients are, et cetera. What keeps the kind of the lines to play in constantly moving is sometimes the ingredients are more vilified in the court of public opinion without a lot of science behind it. And you can try to fight that, but the reality is if consumers don't want those ingredients, then you have to make a change anyway. So we keep our ear to the ground. We have amazing formulators and amazing partners who are always kind of looking at that and looking at what might be next in terms of a challenge. And we adhere to standards that in the US aren't required. So we meet like the European fragrance standard, for example, as a way of to make sure that we're at the forefront of regulatory processes. And we do look at things like Yuko, which is the app kind of you're talking about, and we use processes like Novada to be able to look at our carbon footprint and what we're doing. So there's a lot of tools we use to make sure we're meeting consumers' expectations on it. But it's made a little bit harder when all of a sudden something comes out of left field that isn't necessarily on the scientific radar that you have to react to.
Hmm. Do you find that this is a trend and not a fad, that we're going to be leaning into this for the next 20 years, looking for the best and right clean ingredients? Or do you think that consumers go back and forth looking for an aesthetic that they can't get with the clean ingredients?
Um, this is probably a whole podcast in and of itself, but at least my view is that I think the regulatory environment in the US and the lack of regulatory around cosmetic products creates a lack of certainty that the legal the legal infrastructure often comes in and creates kind of litigation around. Outside of the US, the regulations, as long as you're adhering to the regulations and meeting those standards, there's not as many questions about what is and is not in the product. So until there's a fundamental change, I think in the way that cosmetics and toiletries are regulated in the US, I think it's constantly going to be this question that consumers are going to be searching for to make sure they're making the right choices.
Interesting. I mean, maybe as a leader in the industry, you're going to have to define it, because I don't see anybody else really getting us there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all kinds of retailers or NGOs or other groups that you can try to adhere to. And I think as opposed to trying to always meet everybody's different opinions, we end up writing what we believe in as a company and staying true to what we believe in as a company. And so, a company culture and people is kind of like your own physical fitness. You don't get to the point where I feel like I'm very fit, and then you stop and say like, great, like you better keep working on it or else you become unfit really quickly. And so, so there are things where, you need to show up and show those values at different times. We're obviously going through, our team is based in LA. We're going through the fire situation right now, and it's an important moment about how we show up and what we do for our teams, and how we are compassionate with them about the situation they're in. Not just if they were actually impacted with their homes, but understanding that it actually takes a mental toll, and is a traumatic event, regardless of whether you were personally impacted. So I think I think we keep investing in it, but I look at it as a way to keep a company fit, and I think everybody's clear on it, but it doesn't mean the job is done.
Yeah, back to communication, talking about the fires. Actually, my sister lives in LA, got evacuated back, winds kicked up again.
Yep,
Her daughter was about to go into finals, school got canceled. So you're right, whether you're actually impacted by the fire or by the smoke or by the shutdown of power, because they
sure,
shut
yeah,
power down all around the perimeter, and just the feeling of not being safe and uncertainty, it's hard.
yeah. And
I
your home is not just the structure you live in. I mean, we've gone through the hurricanes here where we live, and while our house survived, the coffee shop we went to didn't, the restaurant we usually go to didn't, and so those are also people that make up your home and your community, and so that's also a tough thing for people to absorb.
So, as a leader, and I think back to being thrown into really dauntless positions where communication matters a lot. I was running a company that was at 11 Broadway during 9/11.
Mm.
And of course, there is no training for do
Right.
you evacuate and how do you communicate with people. But what are you doing for the folks in LA? And what did you do for people around the hurricane? What should people be thinking about when there's a crisis? And it doesn't have to be this big of a
Sure.
crisis.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one, you're giving people a lot of flexibility to understand that is really impacting them. So letting them be able to step away, take care of what is important, making sure they don't feel the pressure to deliver on what the day-to-day is. Two, I think, is providing what those appropriate resources are that they might need. So they might not be aware of the availability of Airbnbs, or how they might be able to pivot there. Our HR team gets involved, certainly as it relates to employees who might want to talk personally about what's going on. But I think also part of it gets back to that comment I made to you before, which is you also can see if someone's not right, and
Mhm.
go like, "How you doing? Are you all right? Do you need to take some time? Do you you want to just talk about it?" And then, I'm going to be out there in a couple of weeks, and I actually just called the hotel to be like, "Are you guys? Is the infrastructure there? Can we still come? Like, or you don't want to burden what is a tough infrastructure, but at the same time, I think it can be helpful to be out there with the team and be able to give them a hug, and say like you'll get through it." And I think also with some of them, I've shared, having gone through the hurricanes in September, of what, you will be good in a few months, and you will, things will start recovering. So I don't know. I think you just have to be compassionate to those. And what's nice about running a smaller company like Raw Sugar is I can make those calls and say, this is the way that we're going to handle it.
Yeah.
Your organization, sometimes that could be a little bit more difficult in terms of how to best, having managed, an organization through the pandemic in a large company. Sometimes it's hard to get full alignment to what you think the right thing is to do.
What's your favorite thing about running a smaller company versus being the head of a much larger company within a multi-billion dollar company?
Well, it's good and it's bad. I mean, making decisions is like a dream. You can go now and just say, this is what we're going to do, and whether it be a pricing, costing, team members, HR thing, you just make decisions and you go, and it's fast. Now, the con of that is your mistakes are very visible. so it's really clear when you make that call, but you better be ready to, there's no syndicating of the blame, in a small company. You just kind of, pick your bootstraps up and move on to the next one, and start working forward. So but yeah, decision making is kind of the clearest thing. It's awesome.
What was the best advice that was given to you, whether it's career or life, that you might want to share with our listeners?
This was one of the questions you also sent me before, and I was thinking about there's so many great ones that like one-liners that people have given me that I remember forever. But one of the ones that I think was the best that kind of changed me and made me more comfortable at work and more comfortable be who I really am is I got promoted to kind of my first president role, and I'm on the board of North America and everything. And I'm walking in, and I'm a competitive, and I can get to be a pretty intense guy.
Really? Didn't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah, a little bit. And so I'm going to these board meetings and everything. And I sat down with Denise Torres, who was a great leader at the time, and I asked her for advice. And one of them was, man, you're intense. And I knew you beforehand, and you were really funny. It's okay to be funny at work. And it was one of those things where, like, I think it's a deeper kind of conversation, but there was a part where I was showing up about who I think people expected me to be versus about who I really was. And this idea of like, it's okay to be funny. It's kind of, it's okay to be yourself at work. I think was a big one that at least when I kind of got to a more senior level was a great piece of advice that I always remember her calling me out on it.
Well, she was really funny.
She was, yeah.
Yeah. And inspiring. Do you think that younger women, women who are emerging in their careers, can also be themselves?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a girl dad, right? So I have two young women that I'm always kind of talking and getting them ready for the working world and everything. And I often encouraging them. They're in that position now where they're showing up in co-ops or other things and they're answering questions, get to know me, and sometimes answering with what they think what they think the right answer is versus what the real answer is. And so there's a lot of it of trying to encourage them to, be themselves. But it's hard in the earlier stages of your career, as you're kind of getting your brand out, your personal brand out. But it's, it'll catch up to you at some day when you feel like you're trying to fake it is not a great place to be.
What advice do you have for young people that are early stage in their career?
Always prepare for everything. And I'll give you an example. I've known you for 30 years. We have a podcast today. You sent me the questions. I've gone through and written all the answers for the podcast today. I can show you my notes. You get prepared. And in the early stages of your career, you have a meeting that's set up by so and so, and you're going to it, and you think being prepared is bringing your notebook and pen to the meeting. Take 15 minutes, Google the people who are in there, look them up on LinkedIn, understand what the topic is about, be curious about it, put it into ChatGPT, ask AI what we think we're going to cover on this. Everything that you have on your calendar, you should spend some time preparing for.
That's great advice. And to this day, I still do that. Clearly, you still do that. And I'm grateful that you took the time to do that. It means a lot. Michael, thank you so much for being with us today. Not only do you give great advice, but you're inspiring, and I feel lucky to have had you on the podcast. I'm going to close with the immortal words of my mom, who said, "You don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you want to do next." So thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Lisa.